My wife turned out to be such a pathetic cheater that she cheated on me not because she no longer liked me as a man, but because she wanted to take all my money from me. I think this is the most humiliating and dirty thing an unfaithful spouse can do. But I knew how to punish her along with her lover. I was scheduled to work all day, but at the last minute my afternoon appointment called to cancel. Her child fell ill, and she had to take him to the hospital. Naturally, I understood. But internally, I was disappointed. I really needed that job. There was nothing I could do about it, though, and it didn't make sense to be angry at her for something that wasn't her fault. She was one of my best clients, so this was just a temporary setback. On my way home, I noticed my work truck needed fuel. I didn't have much cash on me, but at least I could charge this to my business account. Thank goodness for small favors. I also needed to take the truck in for a brake job, but that would be more challenging. It wasn't that the business couldn't afford it, but it would mean time out of service, and I needed every single job I could get. While my truck was fueling, I walked into the convenience store and up to the counter. The cashier looked up and said, "And how are you on this fine Monday?" Trying to lighten the mood, I said, Not too bad. I got an unexpected half day today, so maybe I'll get some things done around the house." It was true that I could tackle some housework, but I was still upset about not having a job this afternoon. What'll it be? I was hungry, and this Valero had surprisingly good deli sandwiches. "I'll have the turkey club, and you know what? I've been on a lucky streak lately, so give me 5 tickets for tonight's Lotto America drawing, and add the All-Star bonus." She printed the ticket and handed it and the sandwich to me. $15, please." I handed her the last $20 from my wallet, and she gave me $5 in change. The change and the ticket went straight into my wallet. For $10, maybe my luck would turn around, I thought. The jackpot tonight was only $10 million, much less than the Powerball and Mega Millions jackpots. But the odds were slightly better. Still terrible, but a bit better. Even the second prize with the All-Star multiplier wouldn't be bad. With the truck now full of fuel, I drove home slowly. I told myself the slow pace was to watch out for any kids who might be playing outside. In reality, I wasn't looking forward to going home, but I had nowhere else to go. I pulled up and parked outside my garage, took a few deep breaths, and decided to sit for a while and eat my sandwich. My mind wandered, reflecting on how I ended up here. A 30-year-old man with no money, a dilapidated house, and a wife who was never satisfied. I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is William O'Neill, and as you might guess from my last name, I'm Irish by heritage. 100% Irish, in fact. I was born in a hospital and raised on a farm near the small city of South North Lake Hills. As for the state, well, much like The Simpsons' Springfield, South North Lake Hills could be in just about any state. All I know for sure is that it's not in your state, whichever one that might be, and it's definitely not in California. Except for a 4-year stint in the Navy, I still live in my hometown to this day. My parents owned a modest farm just outside of town. There I learned how to work the land, care for animals, maintain and repair mechanical equipment, and handle most home repairs, including plumbing and electrical work. We didn't have many luxuries growing up. Any extra money my parents had usually went back into the farm. However, we always had food on the table and clean clothes to wear. When I graduated from high school lacking better ideas, I joined the Navy and was stationed in San Diego. It was there that I met Christy Nichols. She was, and I suspect still is and always will be, stunningly beautiful. Way out of my league beautiful. She was 5'7", well-built, not fat but curvy in all the right places, with shoulder-length strawberry blonde hair, and the most piercing blue eyes I have ever seen. The kind of eyes that seemed to look directly into my soul. As I mentioned, she seemed out of my league. I'm not exactly unfortunate-looking myself, but no one would ever mistake me for an Adonis. I'm about 5'11", never quite reached that mythical 6 mark, and weigh around 180 pounds, mostly lean muscle from years of farm work, Navy service, and my current job. I also have a head of carrot orange hair, a clear sign of my Irish heritage. In fact, it was my Australian best friend Mick who, because of my hair, nicknamed me Bluey. Apparently, in Australia, anyone with red hair is automatically called Bluey. I wasn't thrilled with Bill or Billy, and William seemed too formal. Willie was out of the question. So Bluey stuck, and that's what most people called me. When I met Christy, she was initially hesitant to date me. She had been dating a guy named Chad for a couple of years, but eventually realized the relationship was toxic and ended it. There was an attraction between us, but she said she was unsure about jumping back into dating so soon. We parted ways that day with her having my number, although she wouldn't give me hers. The idea was that she would call me if she wanted to meet up again. I hoped she would, but I didn't hold out much hope. As it turned out, over a month passed after our initial meeting before she reached out to me again, just when I was beginning to lose hope of ever seeing her. With no other prospects at the time, we reconnected and started dating more frequently. After a few dates, we decided to be exclusive. 6 months later, we were deeply in love. A couple of months before my enlistment ended, I had already decided it would be my only term. Christy and I had a serious conversation about our future plans after my discharge. I wanted to move back home, where my family was, and where I believed I had the best chance of establishing a life and career. While I enjoyed my time in San Diego, living there long-term was financially unrealistic for me. Besides, California didn't particularly appeal to me. I preferred a simpler life. Christy, however, had only known San Diego. She perceived my hometown as a place dominated by rednecks. I thought education was the key. I explained that although we didn't have an ocean, we did have a good lake with parks and beaches. I emphasized the more varied climate. I've often joked that being a TV weather person in San Diego must be the easiest job. She was particularly intrigued by my description of snow and the activities it allowed. I showed her that my hometown offered nearly all the amenities San Diego had. In the end, she was convinced, and we moved to South North Lake Hills together. Initially, we stayed with my parents in their large farmhouse. I was a bit apprehensive at first. Although I knew I had a place to return to, I was now bringing someone else along. My parents were great. If she's good enough for you, then she's good enough for us. It calmed me down, but I was worried anyway. There was no need for that. Christy loved my parents very much. In fact, Christy started calling them Mom and Dad. Her own parents had tragically passed away just a couple of years earlier, so my parents had become something of a surrogate parent to her. I married Christy in a simple civil ceremony a few months after returning home and started looking for a paid job and a decent home. We also decided to wait with this and get ourselves in order financially, but in the future, we planned to have children. We were still young in our early 20s, so there was no hurry. It's not that we haven't practiced enough. The closeness with Christy was just amazing. After my time in the Navy, I wasn't too eager to work for someone else. Too many bosses taking credit for my hard work, but blaming me for every perceived mistake, even theirs. I knew I wanted to work for myself, to be my own boss, so that all the rewards and setbacks would be mine alone. What I would do, however, was still a mystery. Worst case, I could always get a job at the local machine shop. I have always had a talent for repairing mechanical equipment and machines, a skill which was honed to a fine point as a machinist's mate in the Navy. I knew college wasn't for me. I made it through high school just fine, but I never had the patience to sit in a classroom all day. Christy, for her part, never seemed interested in finding a job. Without anything beyond a high school education and little real-world experience, there weren't many professional opportunities open to her. Even a waitressing or retail job would have been fine with me. Christy claimed she didn't have it in her to work in any form of customer service. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Maybe if we started a family earlier than expected, she'd be in a good position to be a stay-at-home mom. So I convinced myself anyway. My best friend Mick sparked an idea. Mick noticed that our area had a significant shortage of tradesmen and landscapers for some reason. Social media was full of complaints and pleas for help from people who couldn't get a plumber or electrician within 2 months or 2 weeks in an emergency, at premium emergency rates, of course. If you didn't already have a yard service, forget about it, and those who did often complained about sloppy work and cut corners. But what was the alternative? Doing it themselves? Not likely. So Mick and I started our own business. It was a combined yard service and handyman business, and in winter we did snow removal. With a solid business plan written by Mick, I managed to convince a bank to lend us enough money to get 2 work trucks and all the equipment we needed for yard work and home repairs. Everyone in town knew there was plenty of demand for a business like ours, and it turned out our loan officer was desperate for help himself. He ended up being one of our best customers. We kept things straightforward and charged reasonable rates. Since Mick was single, he was available for emergency calls anytime, day or night. We pooled all our revenues into one fund, paid all business expenses from that, and then split the remaining amount 50-50. Any cash tips we received belonged solely to the person who earned them. This was practical because once tips went into the company pot, they had to be reported to the IRS. Technically, they were reportable anyway, but what the IRS didn't know wouldn't hurt them. Besides, the tips tended to even out in the end and provided some extra money that Christy didn't need to know about. House hunting was an interesting experience for us. In hindsight, it should have been another warning sign. I had saved a decent amount of money from my time in the Navy, giving us at least a decent down payment. Despite this, finding something within our price range was challenging. Due to my job, securing financing was difficult. The business was already doing well, but banks considered the income too unstable, so they only credited me for a certain percentage. We considered having the business purchase the house, but Mick and I wanted to keep our personal affairs separate from the business as much as possible. Christy and I faced 2 choices: either buy a smaller starter home or opt for a larger fixer-upper. Looking back, renting temporarily should have been our third option. But Christy viewed that as wasting money. She insisted on having a place we could call ours. She preferred the larger house, whereas I preferred the smaller one. I wasn't keen on spending my precious free time doing repairs after exhausting workdays. We figured we could always sell and upgrade later. We had a few disagreements along the way. She couldn't grasp why I couldn't just magically produce the funds for the exact house she wanted. I couldn't understand how someone contributing nothing financially had such strong opinions. I struggled to make her see that I couldn't conjure money out of thin air. Looking back, I realized that these should have been warning signs, but our relationship was still at a level where part-time intimacy was amazing. In the end, we compromised and bought the larger house, a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom older home in a decent but far from luxurious part of town called Elysian Fields. I'm not sure how nice it might have been 150 years ago when the area was settled and the city grew, but now there was nothing Elysian about it, and hardly any fields. Except maybe the Fields family who lived nearby, though that surely wasn't the founder's vision. It wasn't quite the slums, but you could see them from our living room. The house included a charming little shop with its own electrical service. And the property, nearly an acre in size, held promise with some time and effort. The house itself required significant updates. The wiring was starting to fail in places, the kitchen was outdated, and the bathrooms had suffered water damage over the years. These were challenges I felt capable of tackling with enough time and money. Yet if it brought happiness to my partner, or at least relieved some pressure, I could see the potential the house and property held. We settled into our routine. Word of mouth quickly spread, and soon Mick and I found ourselves almost overwhelmed with work. Sometimes we collaborated, but mostly we tackled jobs individually. We briefly considered hiring additional help, but decided against the administrative hassle of full-time employees. During busy summers, we did hire a couple of high school students, offering them a chance to earn pocket money and learn valuable skills. Overall, our business did quite well, to the extent that I should have been financially comfortable enough to upgrade our home. However, over time, I began to notice a couple of things. Despite our hard work and the success of our business, I never seemed to have any extra money. Every time I thought I was saving, unexpected home repairs would crop up, or my partner would find something she absolutely had to have: a designer purse, impractical shoes, or even a luxury car like the Cadillac XTS that she insisted on until I caved and bought it for her. Secondly, there was a subtle shift in the princess's attitude towards me. It was so subtle that I didn't notice it until about 6 years later. Initially, apart from times when we were house hunting, her demeanor towards me was loving, and our physical intimacy was intense. However, her affectionate pet names for me started to carry undertones of insult. Our intimate life, which naturally waned over time, almost stopped. When we did get intimate, it was almost like pity. Thirdly, she incessantly pressured me to earn more money. "What more do you want from me, princess? I'm already taking on as much work as I can manage. I barely have time to renovate this house that you insisted on having, into something decent. Meanwhile, you seem to have closets full of designer clothes I've never seen you wear, boxes of expensive jewelry, and our bathroom looks like it belongs in a high-end salon advertisement. If money is such an issue, why not get a job yourself? Then you can buy all the luxury goods you want, and maybe I'll have some spare change left to finish renovating this damn house." I was almost yelling by the end. It was a huge mistake. As a result, we haven't been intimate for almost a year. Surprisingly, it bothered me less than I expected. At that point, thoughts of what would happen if I left her began to swirl in my mind. However, despite everything, I still loved her. It was just becoming harder to like her. I've always been someone who holds on to hope, and divorce wasn't something I believed in. I was raised to see marriage as a lifelong commitment, forsaking all others, and my parents were the perfect example of that. Additionally, I had concerns about the potential financial impact of a divorce. While I wasn't well informed about the specifics, I had heard stories of women hiring formidable lawyers who aggressively pursued the financial assets of their ex-husbands. At that moment, I believed it would be more economical to stay in the marriage. So there I was on that Monday, parked in my driveway. Thankfully, I occasionally received cash tips from appreciative clients. Christy never discovered these, and they were my lifeline, allowing me to keep things together and afford the occasional personal indulgence as well as groceries. Waking up from my daydreams and brushing breadcrumbs from my chest, I got out of the truck and entered the house. It seemed strange to me that the living room was dimly lit. Christy, normally so lazy, would at least have gotten up and watched TV by now or spent more of my hard-earned money in the city. "It doesn't matter," I muttered to myself. I took off my shoes, hung up my work shirt, and headed to the master bedroom when I heard this, the unmistakable sounds that marked the final breakup of my marriage. I froze. "Do it, Chad." Sounds and grunts followed, undoubtedly coming from Chad. Wait, wasn't her toxic ex's name Chad? How the hell did he end up here? Oh my God, that was amazing. Chad spoke up next. "So, baby, when are you going to dump this cuckold loser so we can finally be together for real?" "Chad, darling, you know I can't yet. I'm trying to save up enough money to hire a good lawyer. Then I'll take everything he has from him. Maybe I'll even take over his business. He seems to be doing well. Actually, I think this jerk is hiding something from me. He must earn a fortune. He's always working." The fool clearly had no idea that A, running a business is expensive, and B, she was already spending what little I could bring home on all sorts of nonsense. Was it really all because of that? Couldn't I give her the life she really wanted? Later on, I discovered that despite Christy ending things with Chad years ago, Chad never quite got the message. I guess you could call it ghosting, as the kids say these days. Eventually, Chad managed to find Christy. He showed up in town and conveniently ran into her one day while she was shopping for some frivolous jewelry. By then, our marriage had lost some of its luster, so it didn't take much effort for him to lure her back into his bed. He was skilled at exploiting her frustrations about my financial situation. Regarding Chad's perspective, he said, "Well, babe, I've been waiting for you for 8 long years. I've had to endure this crappy small town for 2 years already. I know it'll pay off eventually, but damn it. Both of us are tired of scraping by while Mr. Moneybags over there lives large. Isn't there any way we can speed up getting our hands on that money so we can get out of this dump? Again, I wasn't sure what money they thought I had. I once read a paper by a psychologist that described how people without means can become intensely envious of those they believe are wealthy. Maybe that was what was happening here. Christy replied, 8 years? Interesting. But it seems that she has not been able to connect all the facts and come up with a stalker. But, I have a great idea. Perhaps it's time for me to greet him a little bit so that he doesn't suspect anything. And, hey, maybe you could put a little kid in there and we could make him raise him as his own. Chad. As funny as it is, we can't add kids to the equation. The idea is to get his money and finally break up with him, remember? The children will only bind you to him for longer than we would like. You're right, as always, baby. At that moment, I was on the verge of a breakdown. How many times has she done the same trick to me in the past? How many times have I come home from work to find her looking forward to me? Now just thinking about it made me physically sick. I almost threw up on the spot, but somehow I managed to restrain myself. I was sure of one thing. I didn't want to get involved with her in any way anymore. After her last words, any hope I had of saving our marriage completely evaporated, and I began to think about how I could take revenge on both of them. One of the ideas that came to my mind was to literally ruin their lives, to play with fire. For example, to set fire to the house where they were staying. Although the idea was attractive, it also had obvious drawbacks. First, forensic investigators are well versed in detecting catalysts. Secondly, I didn't have a reliable alibi for my whereabouts. Thirdly, although the house was insured, the payment would only cover the actual cost of repairs, which I knew was less than the amount I still had to pay off the mortgage. Fourth, insurance doesn't cover arson anyway. I briefly considered entering my bedroom and confronting them, but quickly decided it was wiser to hold my tongue. I had heard enough and needed to plan my next moves. Besides, I suddenly realized I urgently needed to use the restroom. Initially, I thought about using the bathroom in the hallway, but I quickly dismissed the idea. They might hear the flush and become suspicious of my unexpected presence at home. As much as they didn't want to get caught, I also figured they didn't need to know I was aware of their actions. Maintaining the element of surprise would be crucial when I eventually set my trap for them. The problem was I had no clue what form that trap would take. However, I did come up with a mischievous plan. I sneaked into the garage, unlocked her beloved little Cadillac, and relieved myself all over the seats. With any luck, my actions would seep into the upholstery and carpeting. It was hardly fitting retribution for the injustices she was inflicting upon me, but it did provide me with a small sense of satisfaction. With that done, I quietly slipped back out and returned to my truck. I decided to drive over to my parents' house. They were surprised to see me. "I thought you were at work?" my father asked incredulously. I explained how I unexpectedly found myself with the afternoon off, returned home early, and recounted the events that unfolded. Both of them were taken aback. My father visibly reddened, while my mother simply suggested that I stay for dinner. Apparently, she was making her infamous lasagna. If only she would share the recipe. During dinner, we debated my choices. Mom suggested I should swiftly divorce her. Dad and I pointed out the impracticalities of that plan. We considered relocating temporarily to a more favorable state for men to finalize the divorce, but a brief online search revealed American Samoa was the only somewhat fair option due to its traditional practice of throwing unfaithful partners into volcanoes. Mom and Dad emphasized that delaying would only increase the financial toll, both in alimony and her potential claim on my business. But she never contributed a cent or a drop of effort to my business. How can she deserve anything from it, especially after cheating? I argued. I agree, but that's the law nowadays. The court focuses on what they consider a fair division of assets, Dad explained. We even joked about the idea of taking drastic measures against them both. "You know, son, I have a farm and a tractor, plenty of space to bury them. I've always wondered if humans make good fertilizer." Dad chuckled. "I see the appeal, but knowing my luck, wild animals would find them first. Besides, resorting to that would make us worse than they are," I replied. We quickly dismissed the notion as mere banter. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. Mom proposed an alternative. "She seems nice. Is there no chance you two could work things out, perhaps with a solid post-nup to protect yourself?" "Hell no," I exclaimed. "Once someone cheats, they'll always cheat." I trusted her completely, and she shattered that trust in the worst way possible. That kind of trust can't fully come back. I'd always be wondering what she's up to. That's just not a way to live. I figured as much. It's not ideal, but I was trying to think of a way you could safeguard your assets. But you're right. It's probably not worth it. In the end, I decided to consult a lawyer to explore my options. Dad gave me a card for the law firm he used, Dewey, Fukem, and Howe. They're actually decent folks for lawyers. Haven't let me down, Dad assured. I dreaded the thought of facing the cheating person again when Mom suggested I stay the night. I hesitated to impose, but Dad insisted I needed some time away to clear my head, to avoid doing something incredibly foolish. As usual, my parents' intuition turned out to be correct. I called home and came up with an unconvincing excuse about urgent plumbing problems that would keep me out late at night. It looks like I'm just spending the night with my parents tonight. Anyway, I have to run. Mom is already looking at me with an unkind look. I ended the conversation when I noticed Mom's disapproving look directed at my phone. I wondered for a moment if Christy had noticed that I hadn't said my usual "I love you" before hanging up. Not that I care anymore. Later, Dad and I sat for a while longer, drank a couple of beers, and discussed my options and plans for the future. We discussed several ideas that I intended to discuss with my lawyer. The following days passed in a routine. I went to work, returned home when it was necessary, but I always found reasons to stay with my parents. Fortunately, Dad hurt his leg and needed my help with the housework. I couldn't tell if Christy was upset about it or not. Perhaps this gave her more opportunities to spend time with Chad in what used to be our marital bed. My only concern was that she wouldn't suspect anything, although I doubted her self-centered nature would notice it. On Tuesday morning, during a break, I managed to get through to the lawyers. One of their divorce lawyers had some free time on Thursday morning. I had prior commitments, but Mick agreed to take me in between his meetings. A good man, I owe him. Thursday morning came, and I found myself sitting at Natalia Devine's imposing oak desk. One glance from her was enough to tell that she wasn't impressed. Judging by my outfit, she probably decided that I couldn't afford her services. However, despite her appearance, Natalia enjoyed the best reputation in the firm and probably understood that appearances can be deceptive. In truth, she was probably right about my ability to pay for her services, especially if Christy disputes the divorce, as expected. I provided her with the story and wasn't surprised when she outlined just how dire my financial situation was going to be. What did surprise me was the realization that I might be compelled to sell or liquidate my business. Even worse was a new policy concocted by the courts. Apparently, numerous business owners had sold their businesses for substantially less than their actual worth on paper. This led to enough complaints that the courts decided to unilaterally determine business valuations, often with exceedingly generous assessments. There was a notorious local case involving a contentious divorce where a local restaurateur, genuinely attempting to sell his restaurant for market value, could only fetch $500,000. His ex-wife, known for her numerous affairs, had a ruthless attorney who argued that the restaurant, once prosperous decades ago, should be valued much higher. The court sided with this inflated valuation, setting it closer to $2 million. After splitting the amount, the man was left owing $500,000 he didn't have. Tragically, he was found 6 months later, having taken his own life by hanging himself. It's hardly justice, especially since the ex-wife never received her share of the money. But more significantly, this case set a dangerous precedent. I posed a straightforward question to my lawyer. Throughout our marriage, Christy has never contributed a drop of sweat or a dime to my business. Mick and I built it entirely ourselves. Doesn't that count? Not at all, Natalia responded. Legally, her role in managing the household enables you to focus on your business without worrying about domestic chores. Funny, I remarked, because she's never done any of that either. From what I can tell, her job mainly involves spending my money on expensive clothes and jewelry. Even so, it won't sway the court. They're overwhelmed with divorce cases, so they usually just split everything and grant alimony to the non-earning spouse, typically the wife, to maintain her accustomed lifestyle. That statement left me stunned. Accustomed to? If you're willing to end a marriage over infidelity, shouldn't you be prepared to let go of what you're accustomed to as well? And what does that phrase even mean? As Chris Rock once joked, when you're in a restaurant, you're accustomed to eating. Once you leave, that's it. No more food. They don't owe you a steak. My lawyer continued. The main factor that could work in your favor regarding your business is that the court might decide that as a partnership, each partner is entitled to half. So Mick would receive half, and Christy would only be eligible for half of your share. Okay. What if we rewrite the business so that Mick becomes the sole proprietor and I work solely as his employee? I knew Mick would handle this straightforwardly. Once this mess was resolved, we'd return to being equal partners. It was worth a try, I thought. You could do that. However, courts are not naive. Most likely, you'd have to maintain that arrangement for at least 2 years to demonstrate it wasn't just a ploy to avoid paying out. Even then, a skilled lawyer could argue that Christy deserves compensation for the years you co-owned the business. So basically, I'm left with either paying Christy off at some arbitrary court-set value, which might ruin my business and harm my best friend as collateral, or I could endure this sham of a marriage a bit longer, hoping to save my business and avoid paying as much, but even that's uncertain. Is that the gist of it? That sums it up, yes. Everyone has their own idea of what's fair, and this is how the courts have interpreted it. I was furious. How is it fair that she cheats on me, conspires with her lover to drain me financially, and ends up benefiting from it? My Irish stubbornness took over. I outright refused to accept that they could be rewarded for such deceitful behavior. I thanked Natalia and said that I would call her back after I thought about it a little. I had to rush to work that day. Natalia warned me that procrastination would not improve my situation. It was a choice between a bad outcome and an even worse one. She also warned me against rash actions and to avoid any unforeseen consequences in the case of Christy. Natalia mentioned that although the initial consultation was free, a retainer was charged for subsequent services. Even for a short phone call with a simple question, a fee was charged. I was upset, wondering where I could find the money for the retainer, and doubted if I wanted to commit myself at all. In search of advice, I called my dad, who suggested that it would be wise to get a retainer. He also made it clear to me that financially I was on my own. They were facing their own financial difficulties. Mick repeated the same advice when I called him, urging him to deal with the advance. He even suggested the idea of borrowing it from our business, although he admitted that he was not sure of its legality. He hoped that a quick solution to the problem could mitigate any potential consequences, perhaps even presenting it as protecting the interests of the business. So I decided to use the corporate credit card to pay a substantial retainer for Natalia. It's often said that the quality of legal representation matches what clients pay, and I could only hope this would hold true for me. In the following weeks, I felt lost. What options did I have? I briefly considered making Christy and Chad disappear, but I knew I'd be the prime suspect. Even if there was no proof, the accusations would haunt me indefinitely. Hoping Christy would suffer a sudden heart attack seemed improbable. Maybe I could orchestrate it? No, nowadays medical examiners are too thorough. They'd question why a healthy 30-year-old woman suddenly had heart trouble. It was more likely for me to win the lottery than to escape suspicion. Wait, didn't I buy a lottery ticket recently? I should check that. Half distracted, I glanced at the TV when a news segment caught my attention. Local news. The $12 million Lotto America jackpot winner from earlier this month has not yet claimed the prize. Officials urge the winner, who bought the ticket at Valero near South North Lake Hills, to step forward within 180 days, or lose the winnings forever. I retrieved my ticket and checked the numbers from the winning draw. To my surprise, all the numbers matched. I held $12 million in my hands, or rather not quite $12 million. After taxes and opting for the lump sum, the actual amount would be closer to $5 million. Still a significant sum. I briefly entertained thoughts of speeding up my divorce proceedings, giving my soon-to-be ex-wife whatever she wanted, and then cashing in the ticket. Surely she wouldn't have a claim on what came after the divorce, right? Natalia quickly corrected me on that. The timing of claiming doesn't matter. What matters is when you bought it. And regardless of how you look at it, you purchased it while still married. She would be entitled to half, on top of everything else. But I used my own money to buy it. Shouldn't that count for something? Unfortunately, no. Any money acquired during the marriage is considered joint property, so the ticket, bought with marital funds, is joint property too. I understand you're not thrilled about giving your wife anything, and this will only increase her wealth, but at least you'll still come away with something. Still encourages negative behavior. I understand your point of view, but the law is important, not what is morally right. Hey, I just got an idea. What if I give her the ticket in full? In return, we get divorced, and she gives up all my rights to everything else. No home, no business, no alimony. In fact, it's just a lump sum payment, and all it really costs me is $10. Of course she gets the money, it's still a reward for bad behavior. But at least it's mostly funded by others, not me. And maybe I can save my business. Maybe. We won't know until we publish it. They may be so blinded by greed and lust that they will grab onto it. She paused, frowning slightly, as if an idea had just occurred to her. Let me take another look at this ticket. I showed her this. She looked at the picture and grinned. What? I asked. Maybe I have a better plan. She began to explain her idea in detail. I thought it might work, although it would take a little luck. Armed with a plan and papers, I returned home. Upon entering, I wasn't too surprised to find Christy and her lover together. I should have been at work at that time, too. Damn, another piece of furniture that I needed to replace. Come to think of it, I'd have to replace all the furniture. Christy chose not only tasteless things, but also things that were probably spoiled by these two scoundrels. Always quick to seize an opportunity, I pulled Chad away by his oily hair. The urge to disinfect my hands was immediate, preferably with a blowtorch. Hey, what's your problem, man? He whimpered. Don't you realize it's generally considered rude to sleep with another man's wife, especially before the divorce is finalized? Hey, man, he began, but stopped when I kneed him in the groin. Nope. You don't get to sleep with my wife in my house on my furniture and think you have any right to speak. You have nothing I want to hear. Now be a good boy and get the hell out of my house. I escorted him to the door. I might have missed the doorway a few times while escorting Chad out. Oops. I always got a kick out of how Al Bundy did that to Kelly's boyfriends. With that problem handled, I turned to Christy. Sorry, Kunsty. She launched into the typical cheater's excuses. Stop before you embarrass yourself. 1. I've heard all the lies and excuses and I'm not interested. 2. It doesn't matter what you say. This marriage is over. 3. I already know the truth. She got defensive. What the hell do you think you know? I recounted what I had overheard that fateful afternoon when I caught them cheating. Too bad I was too busy working to see what was really happening. I could have dumped your cheating much earlier and saved myself a lot of money and heartache. To hell with you. You men are all so dumb, thinking only of your lower place. Chad and I are going to rip you off, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Hire the best lawyer you can. It will only cost you more. Actually, I'm glad you know that now I don't have to pretend. God, how could you be so stupid if you thought someone like me would live with you until old age? I wasn't going to face her hostility. However, it seems to have unsettled her. She seemed to realize that she was losing control, even if only a little. Are you done with the insults? Good. So, I have a suggestion for you. I know you're evaluating what you think you can get from my business. Despite the almost zero contribution, you think you deserve to be paid. Well, I'm not going to finance your and Chad's adventures. I continued calmly. I have a winning lottery ticket here. You may have heard about it on the news. It was sold a month ago, and the winner never showed up. It just so happens that this is the Valero store located down the street where I bought this ticket. The numbers are exactly the same. I saw the greed in her eyes when she looked at the ticket. Can I take a look at it? Wait a minute. I'm not done yet. I also have the divorce papers ready. You will see this ticket only if you agree to the conditions set out in the documents. Fortunately, for us, there is no waiting period for divorce in our state. If we both agree that the marriage is irreparably ruined and agree on the division of property, everything can end quickly. I handed her the envelope. Take a look, but here's the gist. We're agreeing to a quick divorce. You keep all your personal things, jewelry, clothes, the lot. I had checked already, hoping at least for half the value since I'd paid for most of it. Turns out, it's all hers as personal property, not communal. Tough break. And you get to keep the Cadillac, she cut me off. Speaking of that, there's this weird urine smell I can't figure out. Even the mechanics are stumped. I feigned surprise. Could be the catalytic converter. They say it can start smelling like that when it goes bad. Maybe I'd visited the garage a few times too many lately. I hid a smirk. Anyway, you keep the Cadillac, and I'm forfeiting my claim to the winning lottery ticket. Remember, it's worth $12 million, but after taxes, closer to $5 million. Your share would have been $2.5 million. So you're essentially pocketing an extra $2.5 million. She regarded me with a puzzled expression. What's in it for you? I explained simply, by accepting this ticket, you agree to a swift, uncontested divorce. You'll sign the quitclaim deed for the house, transferring it solely to me. You waive any claim to my business, including its finances, equipment, and earnings. You renounce any rights to my personal belongings. After the divorce, we'll have no further contact, and you must stay at least 1,000 yards away from my property and my parents' property. If we cross paths in public, you'll ignore me and avoid conversation. Essentially, I want this marriage to end quickly and without dispute over my assets. By giving you this ticket, you get what you want, money, and I secure my business's integrity and freedom from future interference. I had initially wanted a clause requiring Christy to move as far away as possible, but Natalia reminded me that I couldn't dictate where someone could live without a restraining order, which would require justification. Even the stipulations about avoiding contact with me, my property, or my parents, she noted, were more of a request without such legal backing. I concluded with, and you forfeit any future right to sue me for any reason. Why insist on no contact and no lawsuits? It's simply to protect myself. I don't want you and Chad to burn through the money and then decide you deserve more, leading to a lawsuit against me. I doubt any court would rule in your favor, but I'd rather not waste time and money defending against even baseless claims. I wasn't entirely truthful. My lawyer had warned me she might challenge the clause preventing her from pursuing my business. If successful, the punitive damages could devastate both Mick and me. The no-sue clause wasn't foolproof, but breaking it would require a highly skilled lawyer. It was another layer of protection for me. I could see her considering her options. Maybe I should consult with a lawyer. I anticipated this, though I hoped she wouldn't. Time for persuasion. You could do that, but Why spend money just to be told this is the best offer? My lawyer has already done the heavy lifting. Why not save yourself the expense and take the best deal possible? Tell you what, let me sweeten the deal. I'll cover the taxes on your share of the lottery winnings. My lawyer had suggested this as a gesture to secure agreement. Taxes on millions are no small amount. As I had hoped, her greed prevailed. Okay, but first, can I see the ticket? My lawyer advised me to hold on to the ticket until the divorce is finalized. After that, I'm supposed to give it to you. But hey, I can show it to you now. And that's exactly what I did, holding the bottom of the ticket. I revealed the winning numbers and demonstrated how they matched. Her eyes widened. So you weren't lying. So all I have to do is agree to a quick divorce and you'll give me this ticket and cover all the taxes on the winnings. Don't forget the other terms we've discussed. Yeah. Like I'd want this crappy house anyway. Leave it to her to throw more shade. Like it even mattered anymore. Once the house was mine and I was keeping more of my money, this place would be a gem. Too bad she couldn't see that. Her loss. So, do we have a deal? Can I sleep on it overnight? I guess so, but don't take too long. This is a limited time offer, as they say. Sleep on it tonight. I'll be staying at my parents'. If you agree, just sign the papers where marked, and I'll submit them. Hopefully we can get before a judge quickly and end this charade. After that, I left. My parents were curious for an update, and I simply explained that my lawyer had finally convinced me to proceed with the divorce, suggesting we cut our losses and move on. They questioned my change of heart, but I conveyed that I had come to realize neither option was ideal, so it was best to wrap things up and move forward. They seemed to suspect I wasn't telling them everything, which was true, but they didn't push, and I wasn't inclined to share more anyway. I knew Christy would likely call Chad, despite my preference otherwise. There was a risk they could collaborate and come up with something that could derail my plans. However, there was nothing I could do about it. I could only hope Chad remained as clueless as I believed him to be, and that Christy's greed blinded her. As it turned out, Christy called me the next morning to confirm she agreed and had signed all the paperwork. I contacted Mick to handle my tasks for the day, explaining the situation, which he understood completely. Safeguarding our business was just as important to him as it was to me. Returning home, I retrieved the packet, ensuring the lottery ticket remained safely in my wallet. It was my only real leverage. Confirming she had signed where necessary, I promptly returned the packet to my lawyer. Natalia inquired, "How do you think it's going?" "So far, so good, I think. There were a couple of moments I was concerned she might resist, but, in the end, her greed worked in our favor." "Great. Let me get this filed with the court. I'll see if we can schedule it for Friday afternoon." Natalia kept her promise and secured us the Friday afternoon court session. There we stood, Christy and I, facing the judge. Emotions surged within me. This marked the end of 8 years of marriage, nearly 9 together. Despite everything, I couldn't deny I had once loved her. She still looked stunning. But why did she have to be so manipulative, so greedy? A single tear slipped from my eye. The judge meticulously reviewed the paperwork. "So, if I understand correctly, both of you seek a divorce citing irreconcilable differences and request the court to grant it without delay." "Yes, Your Honor," we both affirmed. Do either of you oppose this?" "No, Your Honor." "Very well. I see here, Mr. O'Neill, that you claim ownership of the winning ticket for the Lotto America jackpot and propose that Mrs. O'Neill receives it in lieu of any other financial settlement or claims?" I considered my words. "I do hold a winning lottery ticket for her, Your Honor." "And, Mrs. O'Neill, you agree to this arrangement?" "Yes, Your Honor, I do." "And do you affirm that you entered into this agreement freely and without any coercion?" "I do affirm, Your Honor," she replied solemnly. I started to feel a slight nervousness. It wouldn't be good if the judge became suspicious and started asking uncomfortable questions. He said, "Okay, this is somewhat unusual, but this court will respect the wishes of two consenting adults who entered into this agreement willingly. The divorce is granted. Mr. O'Neill will now promptly provide Ms. Nichols with the aforementioned ticket. All terms of the divorce decree are effective immediately. It is so ordered." I handed her the ticket, and she immediately signed the back. With that, it was all over except for the final details. Her personal belongings had already been loaded into a rented U-Haul van along with her Cadillac. She was completely out of my life. On Monday morning, I was halfway through mowing a lawn when my phone rang. Seeing Christy's number, I answered, already suspecting what was coming. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she screamed. "I'm sorry. I'm not sure I follow," I replied innocently. "You jerk. You know exactly what you did. This ticket is worthless." "Worthless? But the numbers matched. I even showed you. I don't understand." "The numbers matched, but the dates didn't. Your ticket was for Monday, September 12th, and the winning drawing was on Wednesday, September 14th. This ticket only won $2 measly. What am I supposed to do with that?" I couldn't help but chuckle. It was indeed careless of me to overlook the date. Through her continued shouting, I managed to interject. "It's not fraud. You waived your right to sue me when you signed the agreement. And remember, no contact, unless through lawyers. Otherwise, please lose this number." With that, I hung up and blocked her number. She tried again, presumably from Chad's phone, but I promptly blocked that too. Sitting back on my mower, I couldn't help but laugh. Indeed, I did have a winning lottery ticket. The fact that it only amounted to $2 didn't bother me. Nor did the promise to pay taxes on my winnings concern me much. Who taxes $2 anyway? And if they did, I'd just claim the $10 I spent on the ticket as gambling losses. Problem solved. The coincidence of one set of numbers on my ticket matching the winning numbers drawn 2 days later was pure luck. It almost felt like destiny was on my side. I always believe in seizing opportunities when they come. Truth be told, I initially thought I had won the jackpot myself and was ready to give it away just to rid myself of my deceitful wife cleanly. It was my lawyer who noticed the mismatched dates. Turns out Natalia had been betrayed by her ex-husband years ago, who emptied her accounts and vanished. Once we initiated our plan, we were fairly certain Christy wouldn't see beyond her own greed. Our main concern was the possibility of the real winner coming forward before our plan concluded, potentially ruining everything. As it turned out, no one ever claimed the jackpot. Rumors circulated that the winner accidentally discarded their ticket. The jackpot rolled over again, and I took another chance by buying a ticket for that draw, and nothing, not even a single dollar. Did you think it would end like that? Surprisingly, I didn't need to worry about the judge either. He immediately understood the true nature of our game, having been similarly betrayed by a cheating spouse. Natalia had specifically requested him for the Friday afternoon slot. His questions were merely to preempt any claims of unfairness if the case were ever reviewed. The Friday slot ensured Christy couldn't rush to the lottery office before the weekend. I could only imagine the lottery commission's reaction when Christy showed up to claim her paltry $2. Those prizes are usually redeemed directly at retailers. Only larger winnings go through the lottery headquarters. The thought of that made me burst into laughter. And that's how, with a bit of luck, I managed to escape from a cheating wife without any complications, all thanks to a $10 lottery ticket and some legal fees. Cheers to me. For those curious, no, I didn't end up with Natalia. Firstly, she was 20 years older than me. Secondly, why would I date a lawyer? They have their benefits, but generally aren't the most trustworthy bunch. Though I have to admit Natalia is better than most. And thirdly, I reconnected with a local girl I had occasionally dated in high school. Her name was Kelly Cooper, and she was incredibly kind-hearted. We had gone on a few dates back then, but due to my responsibilities on my parents' farm, we never got too serious. We lost touch when I left town for the Navy. A few months after the divorce, I was at the bar having a drink with Mick after a long day of mowing lawns and fixing plumbing issues. "Hey, Bluey, that Kelly over there is eyeing you." So is she Sheila or Kelly? Or maybe Sheila Kelly? Very funny. You know who I mean. Don't you remember her? I glanced over and saw a beautiful woman. Honestly, not as stunning as Christy had been, maybe no one ever would be, but lovely in her own way. Besides, I think I've come to appreciate true beauty more deeply now. Doesn't ring a bell. You dolt? That's Kelly Cooper. You went out with her a few times, remember? Odd. I thought she didn't look like the rather plain Kelly I remembered from high school. As I scrutinized more closely, it dawned on me. Take the Kelly I remembered, add a bit of weight, give her a fuller figure with a nice rear and a well-endowed chest, and add a few lines around the eyes. Yes, that was definitely her. It was in the eyes. She had the most striking green-gray eyes. Not glamorous like a movie star's, but they possessed a certain openness and warmth, as if I could glimpse into the depths of her soul. And now she was fixing those eyes on me. I lifted my beer and approached her table. Mind if I join you? Bluey O'Neill, well, I'll be damned. I never thought I'd get the chance to talk to you again. I grinned. You still haven't answered my question. Yep, still the same wise ass. Sit down, sit down. I obliged and we began catching up. Strangely, there was no awkwardness between us. It was almost as though the years since we last met had simply melted away. I recounted my Navy adventures, briefly touched on my marriage and divorce from Christy, saving the juicier bits for later, and how I ended up in business with Mick. Kelly, on her part, shared that she had gone to college, earned a business degree, and landed a job at Ominous Corp. She had steadily climbed the corporate ladder, not too quickly, but at a steady pace, and was well positioned for a senior management role. Kelly continued, I enjoyed our time together in high school and secretly hoped it would lead to something more. When you left town after graduation to join the Navy, I was devastated, thinking we'd never see each other again. Then, when I heard you were back, I was thrilled. I thought I had a chance to win you back, especially since I had grown into myself. I was convinced that once you saw me, we'd be together again. Maybe you weren't interested in me when I was younger, but now I felt like a woman, and I was sure you couldn't resist. But when I saw you with her, the way you were together, it broke my heart all over again. I realized it wasn't meant to be. I was so hurt that I withdrew from everything for almost a year. I even took a medical leave from work for 6 months just to avoid seeing you two. I was angry at you for not choosing me and at her for taking you away. Eventually, I knew I had to move on. I forced myself to get out of the house, started working again from home mostly, but at least I was functioning. A year later, I thought I had finally put it all behind me. Then I met Brad, we dated, and I thought I loved him, so I agreed when he proposed. Brad was a good guy, though not very ambitious. We were married for 2 years, but deep down, I knew something was missing. One day, it hit me. He wasn't you. My feelings for you never really went away. I had just buried them. Maybe I should have asked for a refund from my therapist. When I handed Brad the divorce papers, he wasn't taken aback. He simply acknowledged he had sensed for a while that my heart wasn't in it. He didn't contest the divorce, and we parted ways with what we had brought into the marriage, nothing more, nothing less. She stopped when she noticed my intense stare. What's wrong, Bluey? I replied. Wow, that sounds like something straight out of a stalker movie. Did you really think this was some cheesy romantic comedy? That stuff only happens in the movies. Maybe you should find a better therapist. Her expression turned mortified. Oh, God, I didn't mean it like that. I thought this time would be different. Kelly's voice trailed off, and she seemed on the verge of a breakdown until she caught on that I was laughing uncontrollably. Kelly, I'm just messing with you. Kelly playfully punched me on the arm, though it still stung a bit. But she soon burst into laughter herself. You jerk, you really scared me. Sorry about that. You know, it's strange to think someone would be so hung up on me. Kind of flattering, though. Damn. Maybe this was turning into one of those silly rom-coms. We ended up staying much longer at Jimmy's than we had anticipated. They didn't have to kick us out or anything. Getting too drunk wasn't tolerated at Jimmy's. But we did end up calling a taxi to save on costs, and maybe to steal a few extra moments together. Too soon, though. Why did that thought even cross my mind? We arrived at her apartment building. She wore a hesitant smile as we both stepped out. I could sense she was debating suggesting a nightcap. Time to take charge. I leaned back into the cab and asked the driver to hold on for a moment. He didn't mind. The meter was still running. Turning to Kelly, I said, "Hey, can I get your number? I'd like to see you again." As she recited her phone number, I entered it into my phone and sent her a text. "There, now you have my number too. A nightcap would be nice, but if this leads anywhere, we've hopefully got the rest of our lives. I hope it's the right rest of our lives, if you catch my drift." I kissed her on the cheek quickly and got back into the cab. As we drove off, I glanced back and saw her wearing a big grin. Just before we turned the corner, I watched her ascend the steps to her building's entrance. Would this encounter lead to more? Only God knew, but I was willing to give it a try. But that's a tale for another day. As for Christy and Chad, I never heard from either of them again. I heard Christy went back to San Diego in a hurry, apparently without Chad. Chad was seen a couple of times around town, but I had subtly let it be known that I didn't take kindly to thieves, and I might take personal offense, maybe in a dark alley somewhere. Truthfully, I had no interest in someone like him, but it was amusing to see him squirm. After a few months, no one spotted Chad anymore. Good riddance to bad rubbish.